He pressured me to quit my job to focus on the home. Months later, I learned he'd taken out loans in my name, assuming I wouldn't notice. When the bank called, his panic was all the confirmation I needed. The first crack in my independence didn't come from the bank's phone call. That storm was still months away. It began much earlier in a crowded dining room where laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. I was mid-sentence sharing a story from work when his voice cut through the noise like a blade. She should slow down. A proper wife doesn't need to exhaust herself at an office. The words landed with a weight I couldn't shake. My cousin's smile faltered, my aunt nodded approvingly, and my father avoided my eyes. The room shifted, suddenly colder, though the food was still steaming on the table. I forced a smile, but inside I felt cornered, trapped in a cage built not of walls but of expectations. That moment was the beginning of a slow unraveling, one that would strip me of more than just a paycheck. At first, his insistence came wrapped in tenderness. "You're tired," he would say, brushing his hand across my shoulder. "You work too hard. Let me take care of you." Those words sounded caring, but beneath them lay a quiet demand. Each repetition chipped away at my confidence, painting my ambition as selfishness. I remember one evening when I came home late after finishing a project. He greeted me with a smile, but his eyes held something colder. "Do you think this is fair to me? To us?" His tone was calm, but the question lingered like smoke in the air. I tried to explain that my work mattered, that it gave me purpose, but he shook his head, dismissing my words as if they were excuses. The more I resisted, the sharper his tone became. "Why are you so stubborn? Don't you see this is better for us?" His voice carried frustration, and each argument left me drained, questioning whether my refusal made me selfish. Family gatherings became unbearable. He would drop comments casually as though they were harmless observations. "She should learn to slow down," he'd say, sipping his tea. "A wife's place is in the home." The relatives around the table nodded, their faces lit with approval. My mother stayed quiet, my father avoided my gaze, and I felt the sting of betrayal in their silence. One evening, my aunt leaned toward me and whispered, "He's right, dear. You'll be happier at home." Her words were meant to comfort, but they pierced me deeper than his. I smiled weakly, hiding the storm inside me. I wanted to scream, to tell them that my happiness wasn't tied to the kitchen or the living room, but the weight of tradition pressed down on me, suffocating my voice. The day I resigned is etched into my memory. I walked into the office, the hum of computers and the smell of fresh coffee surrounding me. My colleagues greeted me warmly, unaware of the decision I carried like a stone in my chest. I handed in my letter, my fingers trembling as I slid it across the desk. When I returned home, his smile stretched wide, triumphant. "Finally," he said, pulling me into an embrace. His arms felt heavy, not comforting. My own smile was hollow, a mask hiding the emptiness inside. I whispered to myself that it was temporary, that I would find a way back. But deep down I knew something had shifted, something I couldn't undo. The changes came quietly, almost invisible at first. He began monitoring my spending, asking why I bought certain things, questioning whether they were necessary. A simple coffee with a friend became an interrogation. "Where did you go? Who was there? How much did you spend?" One afternoon I bought a new dress. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Do you really need that? You're not working anymore." His words stung, not because of the dress but because of the reminder that I had lost my independence. He dismissed my opinions during conversations, cutting me off mid-sentence or laughing as though my thoughts were trivial. Once I suggested a new paint color for the living room. He chuckled and said, "Leave these decisions to me." It was a small moment, but it chipped away at my confidence, leaving me hesitant to speak. Another time I tried to share an idea about managing household expenses. He waved his hand, silencing me. "You don't understand these things," he said. I sat quietly, swallowing the ache in my throat. Each dismissal was a reminder that my voice no longer mattered. One evening I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes looked tired, my shoulders slumped. I barely recognized the woman staring back. I had once been vibrant, full of ideas and energy. Now I felt muted, like a painting left too long in the sun, its colors fading. That night I opened a small notebook and began to write. It wasn't much. Just fragments of thoughts, snippets of conversations, feelings I couldn't voice aloud. But as the ink flowed, I felt a flicker of relief. The journal became my hidden outlet, a secret space where I could reclaim my voice. The entries grew longer with time. I wrote about the way his smile seemed wider when mine disappeared, about the suffocating silence that followed every disagreement, about the way relatives praised him for guiding me, while ignoring the cracks forming inside me. I wrote about the loneliness of sitting in a room full of people yet feeling invisible, about the ache of watching my dreams shrink into shadows. Each word was a lifeline, tethering me to the person I used to be. Small incidents piled up, each one a reminder of his growing control. He rearranged the furniture without asking, insisting it was better this way. He corrected me in front of guests, turning my mistakes into jokes. He even chose what I should wear for certain occasions, framing it as helping me look my best. Individually, these moments seemed harmless, even caring. But together they formed a pattern, a tightening grip that left me gasping for air. I remember one afternoon when a friend called, inviting me to a small gathering. I hesitated, knowing the questions that would follow. Who's going? How long will you be gone? Do you really need to go? His words echoed in my mind, and I declined the invitation. After hanging up, I sat in silence, realizing how easily I had surrendered. Yet even in the midst of this quiet erosion, I clung to my journal. It became more than paper and ink. It was a mirror reflecting truths I couldn't speak aloud. I wrote about my fears, my doubts, my longing for freedom. I wrote about the hollow smile I wore, the independence I missed, the voice I refused to let die. The pressure to quit had begun as a suggestion, disguised as care. But it evolved into something heavier, something that pressed against my chest and stole my breath. Each day I felt the walls closing in, yet within those pages I carved out a space where I could still exist. And though no one else knew, that hidden outlet kept me alive. It reminded me that even stripped of independence, even cornered by expectations, I still had a voice, quiet, fragile, but mine. The journal had become my lifeline, a secret place where my voice still existed. Yet even as I clung to those pages, I never imagined how deeply his control had already spread. The first clue arrived quietly, tucked inside a plain white envelope from the bank. It was addressed to me, but before I could reach for it, his hand darted out, swift and deliberate. He pressed the envelope against his chest, muttering something about boring paperwork. Still, in that split second, I caught a glimpse of the words printed across the page: loan details. My stomach dropped, a cold weight settling inside me. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I must have misread. But the unease lingered. That night, as he hummed softly while folding laundry, I replayed the moment over and over. Why had he snatched it so quickly? Why hadn't he let me open mail addressed to me? The questions gnawed at me, refusing to let go. The next morning, I began watching the mailbox more carefully. I timed my errands so I could intercept the post before he did. At first, nothing unusual appeared: utility bills, promotional flyers, the occasional magazine. Then another envelope arrived, again from the bank, again with my name printed neatly across the front. My hands trembled as I tore it open in the quiet of the kitchen. Inside were statements tied to debts I hadn't taken. I felt the room tilt, the floor beneath me unsteady. My name was there, bold and undeniable, linked to numbers I had never signed for. The realization was crushing. He had used my identity without my consent. I confronted him that evening, my voice shaking but firm. "Why are there loans in my name?" I asked, holding the envelope in my hand like evidence in a trial. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his expression calm, almost bored. "It's for us," he said, as though the explanation was obvious. "You're too sensitive. Don't make a big deal out of this." His composure unsettled me more than anger would have. He spoke with such ease, as if forging my name was a minor inconvenience, a household chore. My chest tightened and I struggled to breathe. The calmness only deepened my suspicion. I began checking the mail in secret, slipping envelopes into my bag before he could see. Each letter revealed more debts, more obligations tied to me. The pile grew, a silent mountain of betrayal hidden beneath sweaters in my closet. I couldn't sleep. At night, I lay awake listening to his steady breathing beside me, wondering how many lies were buried beneath that calm exterior. My mind raced with questions. How much had he borrowed? What had he spent it on? Did he believe I would never notice? I knew I needed answers beyond the envelopes. So one afternoon I walked into the bank, pretending I was there to update my account details. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and ink, and the officer behind the desk greeted me with a polite smile. My hands shook as I slid my ID across the counter. "I'd like to review my account," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. The officer typed quickly, his eyes scanning the screen. Then he looked up, his expression shifting. "There are multiple loans under your name," he said. The words hit me like a wave. My knees threatened to buckle, but I steadied myself against the desk. "Can you print the details?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, sliding papers toward me. My name appeared again and again, tied to amounts I had never agreed to. I signed the inquiry papers with trembling hands, each stroke of the pen feeling heavier than the last. Proof lay before me, undeniable and cold. I walked out of the bank with the papers tucked into my bag, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. The city around me buzzed with life, cars honking, vendors calling out, but I felt detached, as though I were moving through a fog. Every step home was heavy, each breath shallow. That evening I placed the papers on the table between us. "Explain this," I demanded. He glanced at them, then at me, his face pale but still composed. "It's for us," he repeated, his tone sharper now. "You wouldn't understand." I stared at him, searching for remorse, for any flicker of guilt. But all I saw was irritation, as though my discovery was an inconvenience rather than a betrayal. Days passed and the tension grew thicker. I avoided his gaze, my mind consumed by the papers hidden in my drawer. Then the turning point arrived. The phone rang one afternoon, the shrill sound slicing through the silence. I answered, and the voice on the other end was firm, professional. "Mrs. Underwood, we were calling about overdue payments on your loans." My breath caught. "What loans?" I asked, though I already knew. The officer listed amounts, dates, deadlines. My hands shook as I gripped the receiver, my heart pounding in my ears. When I hung up, he was standing in the doorway, his face drained of color. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "The bank," I replied, my tone cold. His panic was immediate. He fumbled for words, his hands twitching, his composure shattered. "They shouldn't have called you. I was handling it." "You weren't supposed to." He stopped, realizing too late that his own words betrayed him. I watched him crumble, his calm mask slipping away. His pale face, his fumbling words, his sudden fear. It was all the confirmation I needed. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It stood exposed, raw, and undeniable. Inside me something shifted. The hollow silence that had followed my resignation was replaced with a fire, a quiet but steady flame. He had stolen more than my independence. He had stolen my trust, my name, my identity. And now I knew the truth. That night I sat at my desk, the journal open before me. I wrote furiously, ink smudging beneath my hand. I recorded every detail: the envelopes, the bank visit, the phone call, his panic. Each word was a weapon, each sentence a piece of armor. For the first time in months I felt a sense of clarity. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened something within me. I was no longer just a wife cornered by expectations. I was a woman wronged, a woman who had proof, a woman who would not remain silent. The night I finished writing in my journal, my hand cramped from the furious pace of my words, I knew I couldn't stop at documenting. Proof was no longer enough if it stayed hidden in drawers. His panic during the bank call had stripped away every illusion, and I felt a strange mixture of fear and determination rising inside me. My heart raced, but my mind was clear. I needed help beyond my own strength. The next morning I gathered the documents, the loan papers, the bank statements, the inquiry forms I had signed, and placed them neatly inside a folder. My fingers lingered on the cover, trembling as though the weight of betrayal was stitched into the pages. I walked into a lawyer's office, the smell of polished wood and faint ink filling the air. The receptionist's polite smile steadied me, but when I sat across from the lawyer, my voice wavered. "I think my husband has taken loans in my name," I said, sliding the folder across the desk. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the papers with a practiced eye. His brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. "This is serious," he said finally. "Identity misuse is not just unethical, it's criminal. You have every right to act." His words sent a shiver down my spine. Terrified, yes, but also empowered. For months I had been silenced, dismissed, cornered. Now someone was telling me that my voice mattered, that my evidence carried weight. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. The lawyer guided me through each step, filing complaints, gathering additional proof, preparing statements. I spent long nights at the kitchen table, papers spread out before me, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Each document I signed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. He noticed my distance, of course. "Why are you so distracted lately?" he asked one evening, his tone sharp. I met his gaze, steady now. "Because I'm tired of being silent." He laughed, dismissive, but I saw the flicker of unease in his eyes. The day of court arrived with heavy clouds hanging low in the sky. I walked into the building, the echo of footsteps on marble floors surrounding me. My palms were damp, my heart pounding, but I held the folder tightly against my chest. Inside the courtroom, he sat across from me, his posture relaxed, his smile practiced. He tried to charm the judge, painting me as unstable, exaggerating my emotions, twisting my resistance into weakness. His words dripped with confidence, but I watched the judge's eyes narrow, unimpressed. Then my lawyer slid the forged loan papers across the bench. My name, my signature. Copied, falsified, undeniable. The judge's stern tone cut through the air. "This is not only deceitful but unlawful." His smile faltered. For the first time I saw his arrogance collapse, his composure slipping like sand through fingers. The ruling was clear. My name was cleared, my record restored. But more than that, his deceit was exposed, not just to the court but to family and friends who had once nodded approvingly at his words. I remember walking out of the courtroom, the air crisp against my face, feeling lighter than I had in months. Relatives who had once sided with him now looked at me differently. Some approached quietly, offering apologies. "We didn't know," one cousin whispered, her eyes downcast. Others stayed silent, their shame written across their faces. But I no longer needed their approval. My strength came not from their recognition but from reclaiming my dignity. At home the silence was deafening. He avoided my eyes, his shoulders hunched, his voice stripped of confidence. The man who had once spoken with authority now stumbled over words, his arrogance replaced with unease. I sat at the table, my journal open, and wrote, "Justice is not just about punishment. It is about reclaiming what was stolen." In the days that followed, I began rebuilding. I reconnected with colleagues, reached out to old friends, and slowly pieced together the independence I had lost. Each step felt like a victory, each conversation a reminder that I was more than the role he had tried to confine me to. One afternoon I walked past the mirror and paused. The woman staring back at me looked different, her eyes sharper, her shoulders straighter. The colors that had once faded were returning, vibrant and alive. Relatives continued to react in their own ways. Some tried to justify their silence, saying they hadn't wanted to interfere. Others admitted they had believed his words too easily. I listened, but I didn't carry their guilt. My journey was mine alone, and their approval no longer defined me. At a family gathering, one uncle approached me. "You've shown strength I didn't expect," he said quietly. I smiled, not out of pride but out of peace. "Strength comes when you have no other choice," I replied. Looking back, I realized the lesson was bigger than the loans. It wasn't just about financial betrayal. It was about trust, independence, and standing firm when someone tries to erase your worth. His actions had forced me into a corner, but in that corner, I discovered resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The betrayal became my awakening. That evening, I returned to my journal one last time. I wrote not about pain but about growth. He tried to silence me, but I found my voice. He tried to erase me, but I reclaimed myself. His betrayal was my reckoning, and my resolution was freedom.